What up, what up, what up? A lot has happened since we last chatted. We've got a lot to get to on today's show. Super Bowl 59 officially set. It's a rematch of Super Bowl 57, Chiefs, Eagles. We've got Rams news, a lot to talk about, guys. Welcome to Bleav in Rams, part of the Bleav Network. Erin and Tyler Dragon of USA Today back with you. Subscribe, comment, rate, follow this podcast. I'm speaking really fast because we have so much to get into. I know the Rams season is officially over, but there's still some news to talk about. Mr. Tyler Dragon, first and foremost, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm just getting back from Kansas City, so I'm trying to defrost. There was still snow on the ground there. It was cold. It was not California weather, but I'm doing good. It was a great AFC Championship game.
That's a great one. I know. What surprised you the most?
What surprised me the most? I mean, with the Kansas City Chiefs, really nothing surprises me. If they lose, it's a surprise. But really, the way that they just find ways to win, Patrick Mahomes, just the sign of a great all-time quarterback is, doing what your team needs to do to win. And this time he did it with his legs as well as with his arm. What surprised me maybe on the Buffalo side, they pretty much outplayed them, especially in the second half. There were just a few plays, game-winning plays that they needed to make that Kansas City made, and that's why they are back-to-back Super Bowl champions headed to their third straight Super Bowl. But you have to give it to the Bills, though. Josh Allen played almost a perfect game and still came away with the L. So you have to feel for Buffalo and their fans.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great AFC matchup for sure. I mean, a little surprised Mahomes and the Chiefs going for a three-peat. I was crazy about that, just with how they've had so many close one-score games. I'm also never surprised that when we go on, the leaf blower outside my house decides to somehow start right when we click record. I digress. But we'll chop up everything. We'll talk about the Super Bowl. We've got a lot to get into, some Rams news, some things that were really interesting that Sean McVay had to say. Is Kyren Williams getting an extension? The latest happenings around the NFL and so much more. But first, we've got to pay our sponsors. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform. And Tyler, your number one source for online betting in 2025. That's right. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. The largest selection of odds on everything football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, even UFC, by the way. BetOnline is your number one sports betting source for the new year. We've got every touchdown to three-pointer, hat tricks, you name it. BetOnline has got you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. By the way, the Chiefs are the 1.5 point favorites. We'll get into that game in a moment, but let's get into Rams news and notes, shall we? Sean McVay had some interesting things to say. First and foremost, Jags are interviewing Rams assistant Aubrey Pleasant for their defensive coordinator job. We'll wait to see how that progresses, but I'm not really surprised. Like always, Sean McVay's staff gets picked and prodded during the offseason as they become great candidates for various positions, whether it's head coaching jobs, defensive coordinator positions. So it'll be interesting to see who ends up leaving. Of course, Aubrey potentially may or may not go to Jacksonville. But heading into this offseason, I wanted to talk to you about this, Ty. McVay asked Stafford to provide earlier notice should he decide to retire. He said this, quote, during his sort of end of season press conference. He said, we don't want to have that go on again. I don't think that's good for anybody. I think sooner than later, being able to get that clarity, of course, talking about whether or not Stafford will in fact return. And I think a big question mark is, does Stafford want to return? Does he want to return for the deal he's been given? Remember, they reworked his deal last summer, making it essentially a 1 year, $40 million deal for 2024. No guarantee he's going to be back as the LA Rams QB. Stafford does have 2 years remaining in his 4-year contract, which is for $160 million. So what could they do? Where could they turn? I know McVay said he wants an answer sooner rather than later. How do you see this whole situation playing out with Matthew Stafford in LA?
Stafford's going to come back. I just think, at the end of the season, players need some time to decompress, to kind of reflect, lick their wounds, so to speak, and get healthy. But Stafford, he still has a lot of football left. And I heard him talk at his press conference when they lost, and he even said as much, that he's still playing at a very high level. So I expect the Rams and Stafford's team to get on the negotiating table and maybe sweeten his contract. I Bleav he has no remaining guaranteed money left in his deal. So maybe put some more guarantees on that there, and for him to finish out his contract and remain with the Los Angeles Rams for the next 2 seasons. I mean, you look at what he did this year with this Rams team, a new look Rams team for the most part. Even though Stafford is upper 30s, 36, he has a lot of young pieces around him, and a Puka Nacua and a Kyren Williams and that offensive line that is only going to get better. These players are not even in their prime yet. Nacua's not in his prime yet. Kyren Williams probably not, and it will maybe just entering his prime. So I think Stafford just wants to decompress, spend some time with his wife, spend some time with his kids. And then after everything settles down, I think he'll be back in the Rams uniform.
Right. Yeah. Don't quote me on this. I think he turns 37 in February. But I think the question for me is always, when you're a quarterback and you're Matthew Stafford, is it all about the money, or is it about if he believes that this team can make it to the Super Bowl next year? Because I think that's really what he's hanging his hat on, is maybe the money isn't as enticing. It's more about rings. It's more about legacy. It's more about championships. It's more about getting into the hall. In your opinion, is that something these types of quarterbacks, and of course, obviously, specifically Stafford, is thinking about when he makes this decision during the offseason?
It's both. Players will lie to you. They say the money does not matter. Money certainly does matter, and for Stafford, for everybody. But on the other hand, Stafford's a Super Bowl champion. He's used to winning with the LA Rams. He's won a Super Bowl with the team. So he doesn't want to be in an environment when he's pushing 40, regardless, 36, 37, pushing 40. And he wants to be able to continue to play at a high level with pieces around him. When you're a quarterback, say Tom Brady, for example, he wanted to be in a winning environment later on in his career so he can continue to compete and push for Super Bowls. And I think that's the same thing Matthew Stafford wants. He wants to be in a place in LA knowing that they are going to continue to build around him, put the necessary pieces along the offensive line, and that receiving core with the skill positions, and continuing to build that defense so the Rams could contend not only in the NFC West, but for a Super Bowl.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it sounds like it's a prime real estate. I'm not just talking about living here in sunny California. I'm talking about the real estate of your team, right? You've got Sean McVay as your head coach, the defense, the young defense clicking. And here's what's really interesting. I had Jordan Rodrigue of The Athletic on earlier in the season, and she made a really interesting point, Ty. She said, what we're seeing in LA at the moment is almost sort of a blend and a transition of veterans and youth, right? This defense sort of got a facelift, went younger. Aaron Donald retired. They bring in 2 young guys on the defense from Florida State who showed they made an impact. Les Snead and Sean McVay together know how to draft. It proved to pay off. They have some things they need to work on, which maybe we'll address, not necessarily in this show, but what the Rams will need to do moving forward during the offseason. It's like, would be a hard decision to certainly turn down if the offer made sense. He's got 4 small children here in LA. It sounds to me like it's not a hard decision. Of course, I'm not up there taking hits and having to deal with getting sacked as a professional NFL quarterback. But they worked out a lot of kinks that kind of evolved as we saw throughout the season, right? Getting the offensive line figured out, maybe needing to add some extra pieces to their run game, get Kyren Williams a little support. But to me, overall, Matthew Stafford, in the event he wants to play and not actually retire, LA seems like where else would he go?
Right. The teams that are in need of a quarterback are teams that aren't in contention for a playoff spot. So if I'm Stafford, outside of maybe the Minnesota Vikings, who already have an insurance policy at the quarterback position in McCarthy, but overall, I don't see any other fit for Stafford, really, because all the teams that would want a quarterback aren't really in contention for the division title, let alone a playoff spot.
Yeah, and also if you're the Rams, there aren't a lot of attractive other options, right? I mean, think about it. They're going to have to figure out who are they going to get in the draft. So they're going to have to sort of groom somebody up with the hopes of having them emulate and look after a guy like Stafford in the locker room. But where else would they go in the free agency? What? Rodgers? No. Kirk Cousins? No. Derek Carr? No. I mean, they do have backups in Jimmy G and Stetson. But I mean, I think
at the end of Jimmy G.
I think if they can make a deal, why Stafford isn't something for them. Like if you think about it, the leverage, who has leverage here? I think at the end of the day, it's Stafford. I mean, he's shown he can still sling it, even though he's going to be 37 next year. You do have these rising stars, Puka Nacua, you have Kyren Williams. I mean, it just seems like it makes sense, but we shall see how all of this progresses. And of course, as we mentioned, Sean McVay wanting that answer sooner rather than later. Here's another question as we kind of lean into the conversation about Kyren Williams and his future. Let's talk a little bit of cap. Over the cap, according to Over the Cap, the Rams will only carry over $2.75 million from last year. That's the seventh lowest amount of any team. They were aggressive in some of their free agency moves this season, this most recent season. Some of them worked out, some of them not so much. As of now, the Rams are projected to have $38.3 million in cap space this year, which is right around the middle of all the teams. So in the event they do want to sign some additional free agents, give Stafford a potential extension, it could work out, but always keep in mind cap stuff, cap situations. Those are always going to play a role when it comes to signing, impact players. Kyren Williams was on the conversation talking points for Les Snead. In fact, on Friday, he indicated that the team would be open to such discussions this offseason in terms of giving him a contract as he's eligible entering into his final year of his rookie deal. Let's talk about how that would look. In your opinion, Ty, you're seeing guys like Saquon Barkley. Now, Kyren Williams is a different type of runner, but how robust? Do you see it robust? Do you see it happening soon? Do you see it happening this offseason? What's your take on Kyren Williams and the extension talk that we heard from the Rams this past week?
So it's no secret. The running back position has been devalued over the past few seasons. However, this year, I think that the tide has switched when you look at a Saquon Barkley, when you look at a Derrick Henry, a Josh Jacobs. They have really kind of turned the tide of this position. They all ranked in the top 6 in the league in rushing. So I think with Kyren Williams, he has to use that as leverage and say, I'm a really good running back in this league too, 1,000-yard rusher. I got in the end zone almost every week, it seemed like, and use that in the negotiating table. Now, we just talked about the Rams contract, their salary cap situation. So maybe that might sway them to work on a deal next offseason instead of this offseason. But there's no doubt about it. Kyren Williams should be the bell cow back in LA next year. Blake Corum, they did draft for maybe to see what he can do, but it was pretty apparent that Kyren Williams was the better of the two options, even though they used a high draft pick on Corum. So to answer your question, I don't see it happening this offseason. I'll be pleasantly surprised if it does. That just speaks about the momentum that the running back position has commanded based on the performances by players around the National Football League. But if I was a betting man, bet online, hint, hint, I would bet that Kyren Williams will get that contract next offseason instead of this one.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, they didn't hit too much on Blake Corum, the third round draft pick that they were hoping would support Kyren Williams this season. Kyren had nearly 81% of the team's rushing attempts by running backs. He posted 316 carries for 1,299 yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, all career highs in the 16 games he started in. And, you know, if you think about it, he's rushed for 1,000 yards in each of his last two seasons and became the first running back since Todd Gurley to score 14 rushing downs in a season. Look, when you think about the running back position and you think about what's going on with Matthew Stafford, finding teams that can run the rock, as we see here in the Super Bowl with the Eagles and Saquon Barkley, prioritizing that position, it'll be interesting to see how it progresses. They certainly need someone. In fact, actually, what Les Snead did say is earlier last week, even with Kyren, he's had 2 great years. There is a possibility where he needs a partner to take some of the load off of him. He's probably played more than any running back over the last 2 years. So that's something to think about. That was a quote from Les Snead. So absolutely feels like it's going to be a point of emphasis for the Rams, whether it's finding someone else to add to take the load off, because you certainly don't want to run your running back to the ground, especially when you need someone like him to help take the load off of Matthew Stafford or a quarterback like Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. With older quarterbacks and rookie quarterbacks, their best friend is a good quality running back who can take some of the pressure off the quarterback's hands. So I totally agree.
Trying to take the pressure off the quarterback hands was something Cooper Kupp tried. And it may not be the Cooper Kupp that we have all known and loved in previous years, as we've seen a guy like Puka Nacua emerge in the offense. But a lot of rumors, I want to get your take, Ty, on could he be done as a member of the Rams? You know, he's made some comments about his future being uncertain. McVay has echoed some of those sentiments. It doesn't seem promising, but we don't know. As his current, final 5 years, Kupp saw more than 3 targets just once, which was in the playoff loss to Philly when he was targeted 7 times. So how are you seeing things play out in the future when it comes to your crystal ball and Cooper Kupp in Los Angeles?
I would hate to see Cooper Kupp in another uniform. I mean, what he's done for the Los Angeles Rams franchise, I mean, this has been immeasurable, especially that Offensive Player of the Year campaign, the Super Bowl MVP. So I think he'll play still with the Rams. I know after they lost to the Eagles, he said there's no doubt about that he's going to continue playing football. He did leave the door open if it's going to be with the Rams or another team. To me, they need to have a team-friendly deal for Cooper Kupp. It's pretty obvious that he's not the Cooper Kupp of old. He's had a lot of injuries to his lower extremities that have slowed him down, and which will slow any player down. But he is still a quality receiver and probably a really good high-end number 2 receiver. It's just a question if he can create that separation like he did in his pre-injury and younger years. For the last 4, 5, 6 games, that separation wasn't there. So is that attributed to age? Is that attributed to he wasn't healthy? Or is it attributed to a little bit of both? He has a lot of miles on those tires. So I do think the Rams will probably get a team-friendly deal for Kupp to finish out his NFL days with the Rams. In a perfect world, I would like to see Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford retire together. Let them finish maybe 2-3 years at max, and then them riding off to the sunset together and start a new Rams era.
I mean, maybe Stafford could just throw him a couple mil from his own contract, just because, look, that's what Tom Brady did, right? And certainly, like you mentioned, the connection between Stafford and Cooper Kupp, granted, hard to compete when you have a star like Puka Nacua, but Cooper Kupp still can throw down, and I'm sure Stafford, in the event he comes back, would hate to lose his coveted wide receiver. And they just seem like they have a really great relationship. I've actually loved watching Cooper do some of his stuff on Instagram. He's got an eclectic personality. He hates the way certain people wear socks. I've enjoyed watching his personality, his relationship with his wife, how he talks about his love for his family and football. He's been a great part of the LA Rams family. And yeah, I agree. I think I would hate to see him leave. I know Stafford would hate to see him leave, and I know a lot of Rams fans as well. Before we get into the defense, I do need to tell you a little bit about Underdog Fantasy. It is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. All you need to do, Ty, is pick higher or lower on your favorite player stats, and you can win up to 100 times your money. I recently made 6 picks for the 2 championship games. And when I made all my picks, I tallied it up, and I had a chance to win over $1,100, guys. $50 with a chance to win 1,100 buckaroos. We do have a special promo for you guys tuning in. It's Bleav Rams. That's BLEAV Rams. This promo code gives new users a free pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Play alongside us and make some money. All right, let's get into the defense, because how surprised were you? I think a lot of people were surprised knowing Donald was done. He was not coming back. Chris Shula was the new defensive coordinator. And they had some issues certainly in the beginning of the season, but boy, did we see them finish strong. You got to like what the future holds for certainly Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. What's your take on how you've seen the defense evolve throughout the season?
Yeah, that was a pleasant surprise. I mean, like you said, they started off slow, but they finished strong, especially Jared Verse, who's my pick for defensive rookie of the year. I do believe that they need to address the linebacker situation. Their linebacker corps is a little weak, and that's in the secondary. Secondary was better than expected, but in a draft or maybe even free agency, I would not be surprised if they used early picks on a linebacker and early picks to fortify their secondary. But overall, collectively, that defense played a lot better than expected. They certainly exceeded expectations, and that's starting with Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. Probably they could be 1 and 2 in defensive rookie of the year voting. That's the type of impact they had this season. I mean, I would not be surprised if they did, but for sure, Jared Verse is the prohibitive favorite for defensive rookie of the year.
Yeah. Pro Football Writers of America named Verse their defensive rookie of the year. And as you mentioned, up for the defensive finalist for defensive player of the year as well. So it'll be interesting to see how things pan out for the defense moving forward. Again, just kind of adding more emphasis on why a Stafford would want to return, knowing that things look good. If this was considered a rebuilding year, losing some key players and having some injuries, certainly in the beginning of the season, if you're Stafford and you're looking to really have a run at another championship, sticking around in LA would make a lot of sense. Okay, before we wrap up the episode, because we have two. Before we wrap up the episode, what did you learn about the Rams this season?
What I learned about the Rams this season, they are, even though that they're in a transition period, they are still close to being a Super Bowl type contender. And that's a testament to Sean McVay. That's a testament to Stafford and just the entire team collectively. They have a good blend of young players and I don't want to say old players, but experienced, wily veterans in a Cooper Kupp and a Matthew Stafford. And sometimes it's hard to make that transition, especially when you have a gold jacket guy like Aaron Donald retire, and you're pretty much that sets the stage for a rebuild. But the Rams are not in a rebuild. They're in what Leslie called a retool. And they have retooled their defense. They have retooled their offense, transitioned Cooper Kupp to not the number one receiver, but maybe a number two, number three, and Puka Nacua is the number one. They've made Kyren Williams a bell cow back. They've fortified that front with two legitimate stars at defensive tackle and edge rusher. So they have the pieces where they can continue to contend in the NFC West. And that's huge because you have a 49ers team that's probably in a similar position. They're a little bit old at some places and they're a little bit young at other places. And the Seahawks, I mean, the same way. And the Cardinals are still, up and coming. So the Rams, their time is still now. They can win the division again next year, again the year after that, because they have a really good blend of experienced veteran players who have jewelry, and they have rookies who have performed at a high level and won't be rookies next year, won't be even better going into their sophomore season. So the Rams, they exceeded my expectations for sure. And Rams fans should be optimistic about the future of this franchise.
Yeah, I love what you just said. A retool, not a rebuild, courtesy of Les Snead. And, if I can just throw my 2 cents in covering the team this season, what would you say was the biggest issue for the team? The biggest issue, like just real quick, spit it out.
I would say offensive line. And
okay, hold on. Because of injuries. Yes. The offensive line was questionable which is why they started 1-4. They didn't figure out the right combination for a lot of things, and it was because of injuries. And one of the things I thought was really interesting that Sean McVay said recently was that's something he is going to work on, and that's on him. So it's like, does he need to work on OTAs? Does he need to work on conditioning? Does he need to find more depth? For him, I think it was a really great problem for him to figure out, that he had to figure out this year. Because look, guys, if the Rams didn't have to deal with all those injuries and kind of have to like piecemeal things together, while you're piecemealing, you're trying to find chemistry and have the line gel and get timing right with your wide receivers and your quarterback. This could have been a completely different season for the Rams. But of course, they were snake bit very early on with a ton of injuries in the season, not so much down the stretch. So I think what was really interesting was Sean McVay took the blame. He's going to sort of emphasize that as something he's going to work on during the offseason. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, in my opinion, if that's the biggest issue is mitigating and navigating, which of course every team has to deal with, injuries, and still figure things out like they did to make it to the divisional round, unfortunately losing to the Eagles. I think, like you said, the future is bright. And I think if you're a Rams fan, there's a lot to look forward to. So All right. Well, listen, that's a wrap for us. We're going to do a part 2. So stick around. We're going to talk awards. We're going to talk stuff around the NFL, get into some stuff with the Super Bowl that's just around the corner. So stick with us. Erin Coscarelli, Tyler, Dragon, Bleav in Rams.